Hey, this is Gurmit Combat. I just briefly want to talk today about the retail property sector. Yes, a lot of people, when they think of real estate, they'll just look at the residential market where the house prices are going, shall we say. However, all these markets are linked: commercial, residential, and also retail. These three, they go hand in hand. Why? Because the big players, they have a lot of money invested in the retail sector and the commercial sector. They have a lot of money invested there. With the residential, the big players, they build the projects, yes, but they won't buy the smaller units. The average investor will come in there. But the big players, they are strapped up to their eyeballs in debt with these shopping centres, with these malls, with high street complexes, and with office buildings and also industrial buildings. Let's have a look at this sector and see the knock-on effect it could potentially have on the residential sector. So we have come out of the peak of the COVID spread. Infections are going down, cases are going down. We are allowed to kind of lead a semi-normal life. They call it the new norm. I call it the new abnormal, because there's nothing normal about having to keep a distance. It feels very strange to me. And shopping centres are reopening. Many people will be able to go out there and do their retail therapy. However, guaranteed long queues, restrictions on the amount of people allowed in stores. We all know this. We potentially have had to have queued up somewhere at some point, even to drop some garbage off at the rubbish dump. There's even queues there. I'm amazed that there's queues there. But shops, yes, shopping malls, restrictions on how many people can go in. This is affecting businesses big time. So they've been allowed to open, but they can't have the footfall that they want. They can't have as many people as they want coming and rushing, rubbing shoulders to each other. No, restricted certain number of people in, certain number of people out. That's going to affect their profit. Secondly, obviously, they've been closed down since March. How can these businesses survive? Let me show you what's happening in the UK. Here in the UK, there's a company called Intu, I-N-T-U, as you can see here. And they own some very large malls here. Actually, they own the first mega malls that were open here in the UK. One of them is called Lakeside, which is not too far from me, on the side of London where I live, towards Essex. And another one is called the Trafford Centre, which, if you know your football, Manchester United are at Old Trafford. Yes, it's in Manchester. The Trafford Centre. And Intu are saying that they've warned that shopping malls across the UK may have to close. If it calls in administrators, as it remains locked in crunch talks with lenders. So obviously the lockdown has ended now, but 3 months of no rent coming in, 3 months of zero footfall, and now they're allowed to open up. Their tenants, the retail outlets who grace their very mall highways, their mall promenades, they cannot have footfall coming in. They cannot have the maximum amount of customers which they would like every day, which is unlimited. They're like a flood of customers coming. If you've ever been shopping on Christmas Eve, towards the Christmas period, you know what it's like, right? That's the type of rushes there would have been if there was no social distancing laws, whatever reason they put them in for. I'm not going to go into it, but that's the type of business that they were expecting, and they've been not allowed to have it. And this is going to affect them drastically. Shops are going to close down. These all have food courts. Food courts are closed. We have Westfield Shopping Centre, which is a Canadian company. And we have them two here in London. We have one in the east of London where I'm at in Stratford, and one in the west of London in Shepherd's Bush. My wife went to the one in Stratford a few days ago. Queues everywhere. Food courts are closed. These are major sources of revenue for these mall companies, and they have not been allowed to have their footfall. And here you go. This is just the first collapse. It says some centres have reduced rent collections as a result of COVID-19 and cash trapped under their financial arrangements, which restrict their ability to pay for support, such as shopping centre staff from other entities in the Intu group. So they can't even afford to pay for staff, for security staff, to be around the shopping center complex. So, obviously there's got to be a high level of hygiene now in these places. So they are really suffering. Also in the United Kingdom, there has been a freeze on repossessions on high street retail outlets. So these are shopping malls. There's been a freeze on repossessions until autumn, and I view that as that they're just dragging out a wave of repossessions. And like I said, if it happens in one sector, if it happens in retail, trust me, it's going to affect the residential market, it will affect the commercial market, it will affect the office market. The office market has been hit so hard because everybody's working at home. So that's the UK, right? UK, massive shopping centres are almost in administration, and these guys will get bailed out. As the bigger companies, like the big airliners, they've all got bailed out. The corporations have got bailed out. These shopping centres will get bailed out by your money and my money, taxpayers' money. They will get bailed out. The high street smaller businesses, who they're putting a freeze on their repossessions until autumn, they will not get bailed out. They're going to get thrown to the curb. What's happening in America? Let's have a look in the US across the pond to where I am. Let's get really blocking you. Mark Insider. America's largest mall, and this is May 25, is reportedly 2 months behind on a $1.4 billion loan. Mad. $1.4 billion these guys loaned out, the Mall of America. The biggest mall in the US has missed 2 months of payments on a $1.4 billion commercial mortgage-backed security. That is a massive amount. Where is this going to go? That is gone. That's going to be owned by the bank. And obviously, whoever owns a bank, they're going to own them all. And this is how this works. This is how this works. And just to have a look at that, we can see that the stocks are not looking too great, are they? Look, Dow's down 2.69, S&P down 2.58, Nasdaq down 2. These are all down in the twos, yeah? And look, oil down 5%. Gold is only down 0.26%. What does that tell you? Anyway, it's a different story. Let's have a look at which major retail companies in the US, and this is by NBC News. Let's have a look. Which major retail companies have filed for bankruptcy since the coronavirus pandemic hit? Here's a list, and this list is constantly being updated. And there's a who's who. Look, there's a gourmet food retailer. This is Apex Park, which owns 14 family entertainment water parks across the US. There's restaurants, and restaurants are going to get hit very hard. The hospitality, True Religion apparel, crap clothes, but yes, they're there. Cinema Complex, Costume Design, J. Crew, Gold's Gym. Goodness me, so sad to hear that. They own and operate over 700 gyms in the US and internationally. They filed for bankruptcy. This department store, a luxury department store, the list goes on and on. J.C. Penney. This is a very well-known name in the US. Gone. Hertz. This is very interesting. Hertz filed for Chapter 2 bankruptcy on May 22nd. They got bailed out. So a lot of these bigger organizations, bigger companies are going to get bailed out. How long they're going to be able to keep their heads above water, nobody knows. But come on, ladies and gentlemen, let's not be naive about this. What are these bailouts about? What happened in 1929? Why am I talking about 1929? Let me just briefly tell you what happened around then, right? There was a boom period in the United States called the Roaring Twenties. There were thousands of smaller banks out there, thousands across the United States. And there were a few big player banks. And what did the banks do? The bigger banks, they started lending money to the smaller banks. Lending money to the smaller banks. And then what happened around 1929, 1930, 1931, they pulled in, they called their loans in overnight. The banks did not have enough assets to pay the loans off and pay the people off. Who took possession of the banks when their stocks crashed? Who owns them banks to this day? Them smaller, big player banks. The United States went from having thousands of smaller banks to just having a handful of very large corporation banks. Since 1929, 1930, these banks have been going out to every single country and infiltrating their economic system, right? And they've been taking control of the financial system within almost every single country, and they're part of bigger organizations. Anyway, let's just bring it back to giving out loans. So what the bigger banks did was that they took possession of the smaller banks, yeah, because they lent them something, then they call the loans back in. Those companies, their stocks crashed, and then they bought them out. Same scenario happening here. This is an acquisition of assets, and it happens every time. Every single time there's a financial crash or a, as I like to call it, a cycle. But this is a mega cycle. And what is happening now? In 2008, it was an acquisition of the banks by the governments. They bailed them out with our money, with taxpayers' money, and they didn't bail out the smaller businesses. People got their homes repossessed. They didn't help them. This time round, they are bailing out the bigger corporations. So they are owning everything. It's pretty much almost a socialist state coming here. It's a central authority bailing everybody out with our money, with taxpayers' money, but we're not seeing any benefit. They're owning it. And what are they going to do in the future? Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But that is what's happening with these larger organizations. COVID has just going to show how fragile every single sector is. Every single sector, how we rely on people spending, and how every organization and most people out there are strapped up to so much debt up to their eyeballs. On the face of it, it seems like they're doing very well. They have so much debt that all it takes is 2 or 3 months of not having any income coming in, that they're bankrupt. And we've seen this with airliners, we've seen this with fuel companies, we've seen this with retail outlets, we've seen it everywhere. 3 months, and we're going to see it with billions of people when the repossessions start. That is exactly where we are heading. Like it or not, that is where this is going. And dare I say, and I do dare, this is a premeditated attack on the global economy. That's what this is. This is coming in to seize assets, as is done every time there is a market crash. It is merely a transfer of wealth, whether it's real estate, whether it's physical assets, whether it's stocks or shares, ownerships in organizations, in infrastructure. There's a transfer of wealth from the many to the few, and that is what is happening. In the meantime, it is blowing out a proportion of people out there who need to be going out and earning a living, but they were unable to. Their businesses were closed, and guess what? And I'm talking about the smaller mum and papa stores and self-employed people who've got their businesses, beauty salons, restaurateurs, etc. They will not be able to pull out of this the other end. It's tragic. It's horrible. And I've been preparing for this. It's horrible to see unfolding. The pain and misery that's going to be suffered by billions is almost unbearable. But you've got to look out for yourself. And I've had to do that because in 2008, 2009, when the subprime mortgage crisis hit, I realized that nobody's going to look out for you. You've got to back yourself up. I call it Plan G. And it's cryptocurrency and precious metals all day long. Has to be. Precious metals is a definite starting point for everybody to understand the value it can bring, and also what our money was. It was all precious metals before, and it has been for thousands of years. You know what? I'm going to post a link to my live free masterclass. Actually, it was recorded live. It's recorded, but it's a masterclass on the safest new ways to protect yourself with old money. The link's going to be below. Click on it, back yourself up, stay safe, stay blessed. I'll speak to you soon.